The candle wax dripped beside my fork. Beneath the tablecloth, a box slid against my shoes. And when her smile rose to meet me, so did my silence. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Franklin Harrow. I'm 72 years old. And this is what really happened. The candle wax dripped beside my fork, a slow descent of warm white pooling on porcelain. Someone had lit too many too early, and now the table looked like a shrine to patience gone wrong. The yams steamed in their bowl, cinnamon thick in the air, but I wasn't focused on the food. Not really, because just beneath the starched linen of the tablecloth, I heard it. A slide. Faint. Intentional. I didn't shift, didn't breathe loud, just narrowed my eyes slightly and let the warmth of the moment brush over me like wrapping paper. Decorative, hollow. From my place at the head of the table, I could feel the movement even without looking. A small box had been placed under the table, and it had just moved. She was directly across from me. Always is. My daughter-in-law, Eliza. Sharp smile. Holiday red lipstick. Hair that never dares a strand out of place. She reached for the cranberry sauce, but her eyes flicked, just for a split second, to the floor beneath me. Not at me. Beneath me. And then she smiled. I've learned a lot in 72 years, but the most dangerous smiles are always the smallest. "Frank," she said, voice syrupy as the gravy she passed down the line, "did you want to say grace this year?" I nodded. Of course. I bowed my head, spoke the usual. Thankful for family, health, old recipes, legacy. When I lifted my gaze, she was still smiling, but her hand had vanished beneath the table again. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they pretended not to. You see, this wasn't the first time she tried something during a holiday, but it would be the last. Let me take you back a few months, before the turkey, the table, the box. Back to when things started cracking, quietly, like the fine china my wife used to collect. Before she passed, Margaret had a rule: no drama during family meals. If you have poison to spill, she'd say, do it before dessert, or after the guests leave. She'd say it lightly, with a laugh, but I always knew she meant it. She believed meals were sacred, that breaking bread should never be poisoned with arguments, suspicion, or betrayal. At the time, I thought it was just her way of keeping peace, a polite woman's rule for polite gatherings. But after she died, I realized it wasn't just manners. It was survival. Because the moment she was gone, the table wasn't safe anymore. Eliza stepped right into the kitchen, as if she had been waiting her whole life for that moment. She moved like a woman claiming a throne. Her heels clipped across the tile. Her manicured nails tapped across my wife's recipe cards. She didn't ask. She didn't even pretend to ask. She just began. At first it was small, subtle enough to pass as helpful. She rearranged the spice rack. "More efficient this way," she said. She rewrote the recipe cards in her neat looping script. "Easier for everyone to follow," she explained, though no one had asked for easier. She told my son, Mark, "Let Dad rest. We'll handle the garden." And she said it in such a way that rest sounded like weakness. She said, "We'll handle the finances," with a smile that looked generous but carried the weight of ownership. Mark, poor boy. He nodded along. He always has. My son inherited my eyes, my height, but not my suspicion. He thinks trust is love, thinks doubt is cruelty. And she knows it. By summer's end, I could feel her hand in every corner of this house. One afternoon, I caught her in my study. She had Margaret's stationery box open on the desk. The lid was raised, the papers exposed. She held one of my pens, a Mont Blanc, heavy in the hand, black lacquer with silver trim. A gift from Margaret on my 60th. She jumped when I walked in, slammed the lid as if it burned her. Her smile came too quickly. "Snooping?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Just reminiscing. I miss her too, you know." Her tone was soft. The words were right. But her eyes gave her away. She wasn't reminiscing. She was rehearsing. That was August. By September, she was calling family meetings, without me. I'd find out afterward. Mark would say, "Oh, Eliza thought it'd be good to just talk through the school expenses, the house insurance." He'd say it casually, as if it were nothing. But nothing is never held behind closed doors. By October, she had Mark talking to a new financial advisor, someone she'd heard good things about. A man whose name I'd never seen, whose office I'd never visited. She told Mark, "Your father has done so much, but he needs rest. We should plan for the future." The future. Always her favorite word. Not ours. Not the family's. Heron, and now here we were. November. The holiday dinner. And the box under the table. I didn't ask. Didn't react. I cut another bite of turkey. Slow. Deliberate. As if my hands hadn't just felt the shift of something hidden under linen. I dabbed my mouth with the napkin, buying myself time, letting my mind hum like an old engine. Slow at first, then steady. "Eliza," I said between courses, letting my voice carry across the chatter. "Do you remember the Christmas Margaret got you that pearl pin?" She blinked, just for half a second. Then she smiled again, controlled. "Of course," she said. "You still wear it?" Her fingers brushed her neck instinctively, though there was no pin there. "Not often, it's delicate." I nodded. "So are most lies." The room shifted. A hush fell. Not full silence, just the uneasy kind, when laughter falters, when forks pause mid-air. She froze. Not long, just enough for me to see it. Then she laughed. Loud. Brighter than the candles, sharper than the carving knives. A performance. Everyone chuckled along, relieved, unsure, pretending. But she knew, and I knew. That night, while others slept or drank themselves into forgetful stupor, I lay awake, replaying every second. The tug of the tablecloth, the weight shift, the faint scent of perfume clinging to cardboard. Heron always hers. She wanted something hidden, something dressed like a gift. Not for joy, for leverage, a letter, a document, a trap. But I had been waiting for this. Because months earlier, I'd seen her staring at the framed family tree in the hallway. Margaret had drawn it herself, inked every name by hand. Eliza looked at it not with tenderness, but with calculation. To her, legacy wasn't memory. It was currency. So the week before this dinner, I had gone to my attorney. In person. Paper signed, notarized, sealed. Copies placed where she would never reach. She thought I'd wait. Until the new year. Until the trip. Until I felt ready. I was ready the moment she played her first hand. Last fall, she used Margaret's ribbon, a ribbon my wife had embroidered herself, to tie a letter she slipped into my granddaughter's coat pocket. She called it a game, a scavenger hunt. The children laughed, but the words inside were poison. A letter suggesting my mind was slipping, that I wanted Mark to take over, that I needed rest. That was no game. That was a rehearsal. Now this was her finale. But I had one too. At midnight, the house quiet, I walked into the dining room with a flashlight and gloves. My steps were slow, careful. I lifted the corner of the tablecloth. There it was, red and gold, tied neatly, about the size of a book. The box. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Instead, I made the swap. An identical box. Same size, same ribbon. But mine held the family trust documents. Originals, affidavits, proof. And more than that, a recording. From last week. She had been careless. On the phone. With someone outside this family. Talking about what happens when the old man slips up. I slipped my box into place. Left hers by the coat rack, where it looked like a forgotten gift. She wouldn't notice. Not until it was too late. The next morning, she hummed while she loaded the dishwasher. Smiled with that same sharpness. "Lovely dinner, wasn't it?" she said. "Memorable," I replied. She didn't see the camera I had hidden behind the grandfather clock. Didn't hear the faint click when she made her toast about new beginnings. Didn't know that every whisper near my chair was caught by the directional mic I'd set behind the wreath. She thought she was playing a quiet game, but I had been playing longer. The scent of cloves and citrus clung to the walls like secrets. It was the morning after the dinner, the kind of morning where the house carried a hangover of noise, not from liquor, but from people. The scrape of chairs against wood, the shuffle of slippers down hallways, the echo of grandchildren laughing too loud for the hour. Even the refrigerator hummed with the lazy satisfaction of leftovers crammed onto every shelf. But I sat at the breakfast table in deliberate stillness. The same way I once sat through military briefings, when every blink, every breath, every twitch could betray what you knew or what you suspected. Eliza floated in and out of the kitchen, always moving, always humming. Her robe cinched tight around her waist, tied into a knot so precise it looked rehearsed. She carried mugs, plates, spoons, all with a smile that said she believed her little play had gone unseen, or worse, had gone perfectly. Her voice filled the air like a song no one asked for. "Does anyone want tea?" she chirped, like a hostess on a stage. "Who took the pie knife?" she added, rummaging through drawers she had already rearranged 3 times this year. And then, softer, too casual. "Frank, you're quiet this morning." I simply nodded. Nothing more. Because something had changed overnight. And not just the arrangement of boxes beneath the dining table. She had touched something far more fragile, far more dangerous, a line no one had ever dared cross before. Tradition. In our family, tradition wasn't decorative. It wasn't optional. It was sacred. Every holiday, without fail, Margaret, my Margaret, had baked one thing that tied the whole season together: her cinnamon clove cake. Dense, buttery, rich as memory itself. She topped it with a single sugared orange slice. Always one, never two, never none. A circle of sunlight laid atop the cake, a symbol that no matter how dark the year had been, sweetness would return. It wasn't just dessert, it was ritual. And Eliza had dared to rewrite it. This year she presented her version. Same shape, same name. But when I looked, no sugared slice on top. A clean, bare surface. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Eliza called it intentional. She claimed it was symbolic. "New beginnings," she said brightly. No need to imitate the past. But I heard the truth. What she really meant was, erase it. To her, legacy wasn't something to preserve. It was something to replace. While she served her so-called cake, she raised her glass. A toast. But not the kind born of gratitude. No, this was performance. A monologue dressed in sugar. "I want to thank everyone," she said, "for trusting me with so much this year. Organizing the finances, keeping the estate on track. It's not easy stepping into Margaret's shoes, but I feel her presence every time I do what's right for this family." She let the words hang in the air, like garland. There was a pause. Some nodded, half listening. Mark smiled at her like a boy being handed candy. The rest of the table simply forked into cake, too polite to resist, too wary to question. But I didn't eat. I locked eyes with her across the table. She didn't blink. Not even when the box she believed was still hidden under linen sat quietly in my lawyer's briefcase across town. Time-stamped, notarized, sealed for distribution. She thought she had won, but she didn't know the game had just begun. Later that afternoon, while the grandchildren built puzzles and the aunts bickered over which recipe had too much nutmeg, I stepped onto the back porch. The air was sharp with cold, the kind that bites at your ears and clears the fog of a heavy room. I dialed. "Delivered?" I asked. "Signed and time-stamped," Julia replied. "My attorney, precise, dependable. If she opens the wrong one, she'll be the only one surprised." I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Good." Inside, the sliding glass door creaked open. A shadow stretched across the porch boards. Eliza. "Lovely day, isn't it?" she said, stepping out with a mug of tea cradled in her hands. "Perfect," I replied. She leaned against the railing, casual. Too casual, every movement measured. Like a woman on stage delivering lines she had practiced in the mirror. "I know the holidays are hard for you now," she began, lowering her voice to something softer, something feigned. "With Margaret gone, but I hope you see how much we're all trying." I didn't answer. She filled the silence. She always did. "Mark and I were thinking," she continued, "maybe it's time we streamline things a bit. Before taxes get more complicated. Consolidate assets. Modernize the deed on the lake house." I sipped my coffee. Let her talk. "We'd love your input, of course," she said sweetly. "But there's a lot on your plate. Maybe let us take some of the weight." There it was, the real toast. The one she had been hiding behind cake and ribbon and speeches. "I appreciate the offer," I said quietly. "But I'll keep the weight. It's mine to carry." Her smile stayed on her lips, but her grip on the mug tightened. So tight I thought the porcelain might crack. That evening, while Eliza packed away the holiday plates, and I noticed each one now bore her monogram on the back, as if she were branding the family piece by piece, I slipped into the den. I opened the small drawer beneath the desk. There it was, the original holiday heirloom list, handwritten by Margaret years ago, itemized in her neat hand, notarized, witnessed. It had never been part of the official estate filings, but it was real. Margaret had kept it separate, personal, a map of her heart, divided among the children and grandchildren she loved. Her mother's brooch to Anna, the wooden music box to Noah, the china plates to me, not to be passed on until I was gone. Eliza's name never appeared, not once. Yet 2 weeks ago, I had found her rummaging through Margaret's blanket chest. She had been holding that very brooch in her hand. She claimed she was just organizing. I made a copy of the list that same night. While the others played board games and sipped cider, I sat back, watching, listening, quiet as a ghost in my own home. Then Mark spoke. "Dad," he began, cautious, "Eliza and I wanted to talk to you about the guest house." I tilted my head. "It's just sitting there," he continued. "Needs work. We thought we could turn it into a rental, or even move in ourselves for a while. Help out around the place." Help. That word again. Always dressed in generosity. Always carrying subtraction in its pocket. "That's generous," I said, "but the guest house is already spoken for." They blinked. "Spoken for?" Eliza asked. I nodded. "Paperwork's with Julia." Mark frowned. "You didn't mention." "No," I said, "I didn't. And I wouldn't. Not yet. Because while Eliza wanted property, I had already signed it over to my granddaughter. The only one who still asked about Margaret's quilts. The only one who saw legacy as love, not leverage. The next morning, the box under the table was gone. I found Eliza behind the house, standing near the garbage bin. She held something wrapped in tissue paper. Her jaw was tight, her eyes sharp, her painted calm cracking into a scowl she thought no one could see. She tossed it into the bin. She didn't notice me watching from the window. Didn't realize she had discarded her own box. I smiled. Because she had no idea. The box she thought was mine, the one now sitting safe in Julia's office, didn't just contain letters or estate documents. It contained a video of her, recorded by accident, or so she had claimed, last month. She'd left her phone running during a call with someone I later discovered was a notary assistant. A man she was trying to convince to witness a backdated amendment, one she planned to waive in front of the family at the next review. But there was a flaw. She had used the wrong envelope and mailed it to Julia by mistake. That's how I found out. That's when I started planning. And now she had tossed away her decoy, believing the deed was done. She had no idea what was coming. Because the holidays, the cake, the toast, the whispers under linen, were just the beginning. The air in the hallway felt colder that morning, not because of the furnace. That old beast hummed just fine, pushing out steady warmth through every vent like a heart that refused to quit. No, this cold came from something else. A different kind of chill. The kind that settles in when two people walk past each other, carrying truths they won't say aloud. The kind of cold you feel when someone brushes your sleeve but won't meet your eyes. When silence is not absence, but presence. A fog thick enough to press against your ribs. Eliza brushed past me with a tray of folded linen napkins. Crisp, precise, ironed so stiff they might as well have been carved from marble. She didn't look at me, didn't mutter a good morning. Not even the polite hum people toss at each other when words run out. Her silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. Suspicion. She knew. Not everything. Not yet. But something. Her plan hadn't landed. The box was gone. The narrative she'd been rehearsing in her head, the reveal, the control, the leverage, had slipped. And in its place? Doubt. She carried the tray toward the dining room without breaking stride, but I caught the sharpness in her jaw, the way her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. I stood by the staircase, unmoving, letting the hum of the furnace blend with the creak of the old banister under my palm. From there, I watched as she leaned in close to Mark in the foyer, whispered something into his ear. His brow furrowed, unsure, but he didn't protest. Her hand lifted, just slightly, gesturing toward the study. My study. A place she had entered too many times these past months, always with excuses. Just looking for the stamp book. Just organizing papers for the kids. Always small justifications. Always rehearsed. But she didn't know what I'd added. That morning, while she and Mark had driven to the market, their excuse was fresh sage, as if the turkey hadn't already been carved and eaten. I had opened the third drawer of the oak filing cabinet and placed a folder where the old tax returns used to sit. Inside, one photograph, a single printed still from the holiday dinner camera, time-stamped to the minute. The image caught her hand sliding beneath the linen, caught the corner of the box glinting in the candlelight. Proof, in ink and shadow. Beside it, a notarized page from Julia. Declaration of updated estate status. Dated, signed, legal, indisputable. And beneath those, folded carefully, a letter. My letter. Written in my own hand. To whom it may concern. This home and its contents are no longer under discretionary review by any party not listed on this addendum. Inquiries are to be directed to my legal counsel. Any attempt to contest, edit, or forge documents, digital or handwritten, will result in immediate legal escalation. It ended with one line. Not mine. Margaret's. A line she once scribbled on a napkin before our 40th anniversary dinner, when she was worried about cousins bickering over family rings. Protect what matters, even from the ones who say they love it. I placed the napkin beneath the papers, a quiet weight of memory, and then I left the drawer slightly ajar. Because not all traps need bait. Sometimes the illusion of bait is enough. Later that afternoon, I heard the study door close, a soft click, barely audible over the faint shouts of children out in the snow. But to me, it sounded like a match being struck in a dark room. I didn't move, just stayed in the hallway, leaning against the wall, listening. The house was mostly empty. The kids had gone walking. Mark wrestled with the snowblower in the garage, cursing under his breath every time it sputtered. From the study, silence at first. Then, the creak of the filing cabinet drawer. A pause. Then the sharp intake of breath. I smiled to myself and stepped away before the door reopened. Give her space, I thought. Let her spiral, because I already knew. She had no idea there were more copies. One with Julia, another in the safe behind the cellar wall, a third mailed to Margaret's sister, who adored paper trails almost as much as she disliked Eliza. Let her think she had stumbled onto a secret. Let her think she was the first to know. That kind of false confidence unravels people faster than fear. That evening, she wore her mask again. She laughed louder than everyone else. She carved turkey with the grace of a woman who wanted to be admired, even when there was no one left to admire her. She played hostess, touching shoulders, pouring wine, keeping her script tight. But her eyes betrayed her. They flicked toward me too often, too sharp, too fast. And when I reached beneath the table and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it gently into the hands of my youngest granddaughter, Margaret's little lion, Eliza's mask cracked. She paled. Inside the box was the brooch, the same one Eliza had once tried to pocket under the excuse of safekeeping. But this time, it was sealed with Margaret's handwritten heirloom list. Legal, formal, witnessed. The brooch was no longer a loose thread Eliza could tug at. It had been stitched into the fabric of the next generation. Little Lion beamed, clutching it to her chest with reverence. Only children understand. Eliza reached for her glass and drank deep. Later that night, I found her waiting for me in the hallway. The lights were dim, the house quiet, save for the muffled laughter of grandchildren in the den. "You've been busy," she said, her voice low, too calm. I didn't respond. "I found your letter." I nodded once. "Good." She took a step closer, eyes narrowing. This isn't what Margaret would have wanted. That line again. The one she always used when she was losing. Margaret, I said slowly, carefully, wanted this family to remember, not revise. She wanted us to evolve, she snapped, heat breaking through her calm. No, I said, she wanted us to preserve. Eliza scoffed. You can't just rewrite everything because you don't like the way we're running it. You're not running anything, I answered. My tone even, almost quiet. The kind of quiet that carries more weight than shouting. Her face tightened, lips pulling into a hard line. You think these theatrics, the cameras, the letters, the lawyer, scare me? I stepped closer, enough for her to feel the steadiness in me. I don't think they scare you, I said. I think they expose you. For a moment she faltered. Just a flicker. Her lips parted, a retort caught in her throat. Then footsteps. Mark's. He appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down at us with mild confusion. Everything okay? Eliza turned to him instantly. Of course. Smooth. Sweet. Mask back in place. I said nothing, because the next move wasn't mine anymore. It was already in motion. At 10:37 p.m., Julia received an email. Scheduled, precise, subject, final clause review, for record. Attached, a scan of the handwritten amendment Eliza had tried to pass off as mine. Complete with her copied signature strokes. Her attempt to mimic my scrawl. She'd studied my handwriting carefully, even used an old grocery list I had tossed away last spring to copy my pressure points. But she hadn't noticed the difference in ink, or that the pen she'd stolen from my desk, the Mont Blanc, had been replaced by another. Identical in weight and style, but carrying a tracking filament inside. And now, the forgery sat neatly inside a digital folder labeled Forgery Attempt, Estate Fraud, Pending Filing. It wasn't revenge, it was insurance. Because tomorrow the family would gather again. Not for turkey this time, not for grand speeches. Just brunch, lighthearted, casual, one last toast before the cars pulled out of the driveway and the holiday scattered into memory. But something else would be served with the cinnamon rolls. A quiet announcement, and a redirected heirloom. Because beneath every tradition Eliza tried to hijack, there was a deeper one she never understood. We don't protect things by hiding them. We protect them by naming them. Publicly. The paper crackled like firewood as I unfolded it. Not loudly, not like a gavel slamming or a performance demanding applause. Number just enough. Just enough for the room to hear it, for ears to prick, for eyes to lift from plates. We were seated around the long oak table, the same one Margaret had refused to part with years ago when we downsized the living room. I can still hear her voice the day we argued about space and practicality. She'd simply placed her hand on the wood, her palm gentle but unyielding, and said, "The table stays, because it remembers." And that morning, It remembered. Every mark, every laugh, every argument patched over with pie. The ghosts of decades lingering in the grain. Margaret's hands pressing dough. Grandchildren banging spoons. My wife's last Thanksgiving smile. The table remembered. And now it held this moment. The smell of maple syrup clung to the air, thick and sweet. Browned butter hissed faintly from the skillet on the sideboard, mingling with the warm scent of flaky biscuits cooling in a basket. Orange juice shimmered in tall crystal glasses, catching the light of the chandelier. The kind of morning that looked ordinary, comforting, safe, but not to me. Across from me, Eliza sat stiff in a navy dress. Not red like the dinner, where she had made her play. No, today she chose navy. Subdued, calculated, as if she were trying to fade into the wallpaper. To appear respectable, blameless, but silence can be louder than words. And hers was a silence that pressed against the walls like static. She barely spoke. Let Mark carry the noise. He rambled about winter projects, the snowblower, the roof repairs, and then drifted into something about a digital family archive he and Eliza were planning. Photos, documents, scanned recipes, all for posterity. I let him talk. Let the brunch unfold the way families think brunches are supposed to. Casual, syrup-sticky, harmless. Until the moment came. I laid the folded document on the table beside my plate. The sound was small, but it landed like a stone in still water. The room shifted. Forks froze mid-air. Plates hovered above placemats. Conversations thinned and then broke. "Before anyone leaves," I said, my voice steady, measured, "I have something to share." Mark blinked, confused. Eliza's eyes locked on the paper. "It's just a brief note," I continued. My hands folded calmly over the edge of the document. But an important one. Not about the past. About what comes next. I unfolded the page slowly. The paper whispered against itself as it opened. "This," I said, holding it lightly between two fingers, "is a formal statement of intent, effective immediately." Eliza sat straighter, her spine taut, her lips pressing together. I read aloud, each word clear. All personal heirlooms, property rights, and familial items listed under the Harrow Estates Legacy Clause will be reassigned according to the revision dated November 23rd, notarized, and filed under case number 2075 HR 53. The words didn't just fill the room. They echoed against it. The ceiling carried them upward, and they fell back down heavier. The furnace clicked. Someone's spoon clinked nervously against ceramic. Mark cleared his throat. "Wait, what's that mean?" I met his eyes. "It means the guest house isn't going to be a rental. It's going to be a home for little Lion when she turns 21. Across the table, my granddaughter gasped, a small, sharp sound of disbelief. Her mother's hand flew instinctively to her chest, tears brightening her eyes. Eliza didn't move, didn't blink. I kept my voice even. "It also means that all recorded gifts and heirlooms, including the pearl pin, the china, and Margaret's quilt, are now assigned directly to their named recipients. No executor oversight." The words hung. No one spoke. I turned my gaze directly to Eliza. "And it means," I said slower now, "that the document you attempted to present as mine, with backdated language and a forged signature, has been submitted for legal review, with video evidence." Her breath caught. Not loudly, not theatrically. Just a quiet hitch, but sharp enough to ripple across the table like the sound of glass breaking. "I never," she began, her voice fragile, frayed. "You did," I interrupted, my tone flat, final. And then I placed a second paper on the table, the screenshot. Her hand, the box. The tablecloth lifted just enough. The timestamp stamped in the corner. The angle clear, from the grandfather clock. Mark stared at it, color draining from his face. "Eliza," he whispered. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. She looked around, desperate. "I was trying to help. You said you were tired. You said, I never said change the will, I cut in. My voice clipped, each syllable deliberate. I never said take what wasn't yours. Her head turned quickly, searching for allies, eyes darting from one face to another, looking for someone to nod, to smile, to rewrite the moment for her. But the story was already written. I rose slowly, letting the silence stretch, heavy as stone. And then I said, there's one more thing. I reached beneath the table, not rushed, not secretive, deliberate. And I pulled out the third box, not the decoy, not her fake, the original, wrapped in Margaret's ribbon, still faintly carrying the cedar scent from her old armoire. I held it for a moment, letting the family see it, letting Eliza's eyes widen. This, I said, my voice soft but resonant, is the final item Margaret prepared before she passed. She asked me to give it during the last family brunch of the year. I placed it in my granddaughter's hands. Little Lion cradled it like a treasure. She untied the ribbon carefully, fingers trembling. Unwrapped the paper as though afraid it might vanish. Inside was a small velvet pouch. She opened it and drew out the deed to the lake house, her name already printed below mine. Mark exhaled, his chest heaving like he had just run uphill. You changed everything? I shook my head. Number I restored it. Eliza stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't get to do this alone. I didn't, I said evenly. Julia witnessed. The notary stamped. And Margaret... I paused, my throat tightening for just a heartbeat. Margaret signed the intention page before she passed. Eliza's face cracked. Her control slipped. You planned this. No, I said softly. You did. I just responded. She whipped toward Mark, her voice sharp, almost desperate. Tell me you didn't know. Mark shook his head. I didn't, but... His voice faltered. His eyes lowered. But I should have. The silence that followed wrapped the table like a shroud. Eliza's gaze darted, searching, from one cousin to another, to the children, to me, to Mark, for sympathy, for rescue. No one spoke. And then, as if the silence was unbearable, her voice rose. You're punishing me because I took initiative? Because I actually did something while the rest of you clung to your dusty traditions? Her words trembled with anger, with fear. I met her eyes, steady, clear. Number, I'm protecting them. For the first time since I'd known her, Eliza faltered. Not anger now. Something else flickered in her eyes. Fear. Because she realized, in that moment, that it was over. Not just the brunch, not just the box. The game, the will, written and unwritten, had shifted. The family would remember this day not as a confrontation, but as a correction. And Eliza would no longer write the next chapter. The fire crackled softly behind me, casting a low amber glow that reached only halfway across the room. It wasn't the kind of fire that roared, not the kind that demanded attention. Just a steady warmth, steady enough to keep shadows from swallowing the room whole. The flames licked the logs in quiet rhythm, each pop and hiss marking time in a space that had seen both celebration and betrayal within the same week. The guests were gone. The brunch plates scrubbed clean, stacked neatly where Margaret used to place them. The quilt folded carefully over the back of the chair she always claimed. Her chair. The one no one sat in after she passed, because it still held her shape, her silence, her scent. All that remained now were shadows, silence, and the one last thing I had to do. Mark stood by the mantel, hands buried deep in his pockets. His posture was tense, but his eyes were heavier than I'd seen in years. He hadn't said much since the reading, hadn't spoken to Eliza at all. The distance between them at brunch had been louder than any argument. She had gone to the guest room 2 hours ago, packed in silence, zipped bags, closed drawers. Each sound carried through the old house like footsteps on a stage floor. When she shut the door behind her, it was final, a quiet exit that didn't need words. Mark finally looked at me. "You really had it all ready," he said. His voice was low, hushed, as though even the fire might overhear. I met his gaze. I had no choice. He swallowed, looked down at the hearth. The light caught the lines in his face, lines that mirrored my own, though younger, less set. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me." The pause between us was long. Too long. The kind of silence that only fathers and sons can know. The kind layered with history, pride, regret. Silence that remembers old baseball games and forgotten apologies. Silence that carries both the weight of mistakes and the hope of repair. Mark finally broke it. "I thought she was helping." I shook my head. "She was helping herself." "There's a difference." His shoulders dropped. A nod. Small, reluctant. I should have seen it. "You weren't supposed to," I said. My voice softened. "That's how people like her operate. They don't attack the strong walls. They whisper at the hinges." He winced, the truth landing heavier than accusation. "So what happens now?" he asked. "She won't challenge it," I said simply. "Not after today." "And if she does?" "She won't win." I walked over to the fire, knelt slightly, and pulled open a small wooden box that Margaret had left me. She'd prepared it the night before she died. I'd never shown it to anyone, not even Mark. The wood creaked as I lifted the lid. Inside, a single envelope rested, the paper aged slightly at the edges, but untouched. My fingers brushed over the embossed lettering, the handwriting familiar. Margaret's hand. Mark stepped closer. His voice was careful. "You're mailing that?" "Yes." "To who?" "Margaret's sister," I said. "As promised. She'll make sure every heirloom is documented, assigned, passed on. Not just as objects, but as memory." Mark studied me. "You could have just burned it all. Started fresh." I looked at him then, letting the firelight catch my eyes. That's what Eliza wanted. Understanding crossed his face. A slow nod. Not quick, not defensive, just acceptance, inch by inch. The hallway floor creaked. We both turned. Eliza emerged. A suitcase in one hand, her coat already on. The kind of posture that says departure is already decided, even if the feet haven't crossed the threshold yet. Her eyes were puffy, but dry. She had cried earlier, I knew that much. But now she'd emptied herself. Nothing left but resolve. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "I'll be gone by morning." I nodded once. She turned to Mark, her voice thin, stripped of its usual confidence. "Are you coming?" Mark's jaw tightened, his hands fisted at his sides. He shook his head. "I'm staying here tonight." A pause followed, long enough for hope to flicker. Then die. Her lips trembled, just slightly. And then, in a voice that tried to be cold, but trembled at the edges, she whispered, "This isn't over." I stepped forward. Between them. "You're right," I said. Her eyes widened, startled. "It's not over," I continued, my tone steady, calm, but firm. "Because what you tried to break isn't just a will or a deed. It's a lineage, a legacy, a way of remembering the people who came before us." Her throat bobbed. "You came into this family and tried to rearrange it like furniture," I said. "But families aren't made of furniture. They're made of foundation, and the foundation remembers." She opened her mouth, a retort ready. But no words came. She closed it again. Then she turned, lifted her suitcase, walked out the door. It clicked shut behind her, not slammed, not thrown, just done. Mark sat down slowly. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Neither of us flinched. "She's going to say a lot," he murmured. "Let her. She'll twist it, make it about control, about you." "I know." He looked at me, searching. "You're not worried?" "No." He leaned back, exhaled. Then, almost reluctantly, he smiled. "You're a lot scarier than you used to be." I chuckled. Number you just started paying attention. He reached for the folder I'd left on the side table, the heirloom reassignment notes. He opened it, flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning line by line. She gave you hell, didn't she? He asked softly. I nodded. But I learned. He closed the folder, his hand resting on it like a weight. What now? Now, I said, walking to the cabinet. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. We prepare for next year. I carried it back to the table, set it down carefully, and opened it. Inside was Margaret's watch, the one she wore only on holidays. The leather strap worn, softened by time, the face scratched in small ways, but still ticking. I held it for a second, then handed it to Mark. For little Lion, I said, when the time's right. He cradled it carefully, his thumb brushing over the strap. His voice dropped to a whisper. You really think she's ready? She's not, I said plainly. His brow lifted. But she will be? I smiled. She's watching. That's how it starts. We sat there for a while, just the two of us. The fire crackling softly, the mantel clock ticking in the background. No drama, no demands, only warmth, only memory. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like itself again. Justice hadn't come with shouting. It hadn't come with fists or fury. It had come with paper, with signatures, with evidence, with memory preserved in ink. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. And the house, our house, finally felt like home again.